You know what that is, everybody? All right, well, we're going to talk about that. Well, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. We have a great guest today, and this is session number 33. My band's here. Barry's here.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do it! Yes! The Podcast Engineering Show. If I wasn't having fun doing this would be work or something. I don't know. Well, welcome to the show, everyone. My name is Chris Curran. I'm an audio engineer with significant experience in the music business, mostly years ago, actually. I haven't been in that for a while, but right now I produce podcasts for Forbes and Dun & Bradstreet, as well as select business authors and companies. And on this show, we talk about the audio engineering side of podcasting. This is the more hardcore audio side, the sound, the mixing, the editing. We're not talking about, listeners and marketing and email templates and all that. There's plenty of other great shows that talk about that stuff. We talk about equipment, we talk about workflow, and basically, hopefully, we can, with our expert guests, along with myself, hopefully we can really bring you some tips and tricks that'll not only make your podcasts sound better, but also speed up your production as well. So maybe you're producing your own podcast, or maybe you're someone who's producing 10 shows for a bunch of clients. There's a lot to learn here. And of course, Barry is with me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Barry, you would not miss this episode with Jonathan Messenger ever, would you?
No way. You crazy?
That's right. You wouldn't miss it. Hey, real quick. Are you going to, question for you listening, are you going to be in Lexington, Kentucky on April 21st and 22nd next year, 2017? It's a serious question. Are you going to be in Lexington, Kentucky, April 21st and 22nd? Well, I am. And if you or anyone you know has a podcast or wants to have a podcast in the medical education field, this is a blooming field for podcasting, medical education. Well, there's the podcasting course. That's what this, it's an event, and I'm one of the keynote speakers, and it's in Lexington, Kentucky, and the website is thepodcastingcourse.com. You'll learn a lot. I mean, I guess if you were not in medical education, I guess you could still go. I don't know. Jonathan, you think they're keeping people out who are not in medical education?
Oh, yeah. I think they're checking the lanyards on the way in, for sure.
Are they doing background checks?
Yeah. You got to show up in scrubs, I think.
Nice. Oh, I should do that for one of my keynotes.
Yeah, right.
That's a good idea. Anyway, this show is also brought to you by Podcast Engineering School. It's the school I'm starting, teaching courses about not only EQ and compression and mastering and editing and plugins, but I'm going to have a certification course which can certify you or individuals as a podcast engineer, because there's a lot of jobs coming up and a lot of people want to start their own business producing podcasts. I mean, Jonathan, Jonathan Messenger is my guest. I always just start talking to my guests before I introduce you. But I have a little story here. Jonathan, you've been listening to the Podcast Engineering Show for many weeks, and you actually sent me a note. And in your note, you said, hey, by the way, I'm starting this new show. It's called The Alien Adventures of Caspian.
That's right.
And I was like, oh, this is cool. And I went to the website, and on the website, it says, it talks about Caspian and how he's a kid living on a space station, and he's going to have a bunch of alien adventures. And there's a little introduction to the podcast series, and I listened to that, and I really liked it. And I've started listening to it, and so far I've listened to all the episodes. So you are the host of the show, and you're producing the show, which I know you're going to talk about. It's more work than you thought it was, but so the Alien Adventures of Caspian. We're going to listen to the 2-minute or so introduction to the podcast in a minute. That's, in fact, at the very start of the show, that's the sound you heard.
Hearing that noise, it's like Pavlovian for me now, where I heard that and I go into the narration mode or something,
Right? I was waiting to hear your voice, and then I spoke, and it was like, oh, that's weird.
Right.
anyway, a little teaser. So this show is just one of many shows you're going to produce through your company, Typedrawer Media, and the link to that will be in the show post. But you're going to start making more interactive story podcasts for kids, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the idea for the show, for Finn Caspian and then shows moving forward, is that, there's not a lot of podcasts for kids, and a lot of the podcasts that are out there for kids are either science-based, they're kind of educational podcasts, or they're for younger kids. They're like fairy tales and things like that. And there are really, really great podcasts that do that, and I could talk about that, but there are some really, really great shows that do that. But there aren't a lot of shows where for kind of maybe slightly older kids. My show right now is for ages maybe like 5 to 10. And what I really wanted to do was have kids have input into the show. So it's not just something that they're listening to, it's something they can listen to with their parents. They can talk about it. They can, we do things like kids record themselves telling alien jokes, and they send them in and we play those jokes on the show. They send art into the show. There's all sorts of stuff where the kids, right now there's actually a story going on. There's a thread going on the show where one of the characters was proposed by a kid who drew a picture and sent it in. And so I made one of the characters out of one of his drawings. So it's really trying to keep the kids involved in the creative process as well.
That is pretty cool. I mean, everyone in podcasting talks about engagement, right? You got to get your audience to engage. And you have really come up with some great ways to engage the kids. And the thing with kids is they love it. They just want to have fun. I mean, adults, we're so boring and, we're in our routine and it's like, oh, sign up for my email newsletter. It's like, oh.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I have two kids. I have a 7-year-old son and a 1-year-old son. And if you read a lot of children's books, I mean, obviously there are great children's books out there, but if you read a lot of kind of picture books and everything is always trying to teach kids something, always telling them how to behave or always telling them how to count or whatever it is. It's always like this kind of controlled experience. And so that's part of the idea for the show as well, is that all the listeners out there, your kids will learn nothing from the show. No, that's not true. Hopefully there's some good kind of like moral stories in there, stuff like that, or like how to be a good friend kind of things. But like, it's really trying to get away from the didactic way that kids entertainment is for kids, and really just something they can have fun with. Totally.
And I should mention, you also do the Public Impact podcast, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. We're going to talk about the production of The Alien Adventures of Finn Caspian. We're going to focus on that. It is a storytelling podcast. It's you basically narrating a story with a bunch of sound clips, with a bunch of different characters, a bunch of different voices, including a lot of robots, which is just awesome. We're going to talk about that, how you do the robot voices, and maybe how you incorporate the music and how you really craft this thing. The final episodes, because I've been listening to all the episodes. To me, it's really exciting. I've been, caught in the podcaster's mindset of pretty much anything I've ever done in podcasting is just interview based, and that's getting really old really quick. I mean, it's like, so Jonathan, tell me about yourself and your company. And it's like, when I ever hear that question, I literally turn it off. I won't listen to it. And you heard last episode or a few episodes ago, Cliff Ravenscraft said he doesn't even listen to any interview podcasts at all.
Right.
Does not subscribe, doesn't listen, unless it's something that's, unless 5 of his friends say, dude, you need to listen to that episode. Then he'll hear it. But so I like the storytelling thing. I really want to play the introduction to the podcast series. Can we do that, Jonathan?
Yeah, by all means.
Okay, so it's a couple minutes, and then just if you're a really hardcore audio guy and you're like, why aren't they talking about EQ and compression yet? We're gonna get to that. but let's play. I really want to play this. This is the introduction to the podcast series, which is produced by Jonathan Messenger, our guest. It's called The Alien Adventures of Finn
Hello and welcome to the alien adventures of Finn Caspian. My name is Jonathan Messenger, and from what I understand, a lot of you don't know who Finn Caspian is. But of course you've heard of the famous Marlow 280 Interplanetary Exploratory Space Station, right? I'm just kidding, of course you've heard of the famous Marlow 280 Interplanetary Exploratory Space Station. You and everyone in your family and everyone you've ever met has heard of the famous Marlow 280 Interplanetary Exploratory Space Station. But despite all the Marlow books, and movies, and songs, and board games, and interpretive ballets, and casual dinnerware, and trading cards, and monogrammed school supplies, and fruit snacks, and patio furniture, and the Marlow Planet Pilates 20-minute workout DVD Volume 1s through 5. A lot of people haven't heard the story of Finn Caspian, one of the Marlow's greatest heroes. So I'm here to tell you Finn's story, and how he and his best friends Abigail, Elias, and Vale came to be in Explorers Troop 301, taking off from the Marlow space station to explore uncharted planets, help all sorts of crazy and occasionally two-headed aliens, and solve a mystery that threatened to destroy the Marlow. So every week I'll tell you another story of Finn and how...
Excuse me?
Sorry about that. So every week I'll tell you another story of how Finn and his friends... Finn and his friends were going to... I'll tell you the story that... I'm going to tell you that...
Excuse me?
Finn and his friends will...
me?
Excuse me for a second. Yes? What is it?
Aren't you going to mention the robots?
Yeah, but that was going to be a surprise.
Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert.
Okay, sorry about that, but yes, it's true, as my mechanical friend here implied, the Marlow is full of robots, and the story of Finn getting his very own robot is how the alien adventures got their start. So every week, we'll bring you a new story, each episode only about 15 to 20 minutes, perfect for when you're running errands in the car, waiting for dinner to cook, or winding down before bed. Now here's one last thing. Because this story is for kids, I need kids to help me tell it. My 6-year-old son Griffin will serve as my editor. Say hi to everyone, Griff.
Hi, hello.
Great, thanks. And I need his help and yours to make sure you're getting Finn's full story. So if you go to finncaspian.com/contact after each episode, you can tell me what you think of the show, what else you would like to see, what you think will happen next, what your favorite book is, or what you had for lunch. Any idea you have may help shape this story, and we'll play some of those ideas in each episode. So have your parents subscribe to the show in iTunes, Google Play, or whatever app they use to listen to the podcast. You can also hear each episode at finncaspian.com, and in a couple of weeks on the Finn Caspian app for iOS or Android. So subscribe, because starting August 9th, we'll begin the alien adventures of Finn Caspian. And yes, there will be robots.
Spoiler alert.
Yes. Right? I love that.
I haven't heard that in a while.
Really? I do that to my wife now. She'll be talking. I'll be like, ahem. I love that. That's awesome. So you wrote the whole thing, right, Jonathan?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So I've been writing each episode.
Okay. So now, as far as production, did you like produce all the episodes and then start putting them out one by one, or are you sort of producing it as you're going?
I'm producing it as I'm going, and I'm actually now... So I wrote the first maybe 6 or 7 episodes ahead of time, but now I'm actually writing... So I spend the first half of the week writing the episode, and then I spend the second half of the week producing the episode.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I mean when I say it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. I mean, especially taking the input from the kids and the listeners who are kids and doing that. So... All right, so let's get into it. The speed round of this show, it's where you kind of go through your production equipment and workflow pretty quickly. Let's just go through it real quick, and then we'll step through it in a more detailed way. So go ahead.
Sure. So I have a Heil PR30 microphone, which I know that the PR40 is kind of the standard for a lot of podcasters, but I was too cheap to buy the PR40. The PR30 was about $100, $150 cheaper, and it sounded okay, so I went with the PR30.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Barry knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
and
knows.
Then the PR30 runs through a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, and that goes into my MacBook, and that's the basic. It's a very simple setup. I spent a lot of time before I did the show. I tested probably 7 or 8 mics and a couple different mixers and a couple different setups, and really just kind of stripped it down to just this setup.
Interesting. How did you do all that testing, by the way?
I was a very bad Amazon.com customer.
Oh, I see. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough. Totally fair enough. Come on. All right.
Bezos can take that. He can.
Yeah,
handle it, so.
it's all good. So, all right. So your recording setup is very simple. So now let's talk keep going.
Sure. So, and I record everything. I use Hindenburg Journalist Pro as my software, as my DAW. And so I record everything straight into Hindenburg, and I record my narration first on its own as its own file. So I'll do the narration, I'll edit it all down, and then I will run some some compression on it, some EQ and that sort of thing, and then export it as a WAV file. And then I bring it into a template in Hindenburg that has a lot of tracks in it because it has different tracks for different robot voices or different alien voices and different sound effects and things like that. And so it's actually at this point getting kind of unwieldy, and I need to pare it down. But I'll pull that vocal track in to that template, and then I'll record the robot voices separately. And so we can talk about that I don't know if you want to get into the robot voices already or not.
Yeah, let's keep sailing through. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the robot voices, but let's just wrap up the speed round. So you got everything in one sort of template in Hindenburg.
Right. Yep. And then I just once I have it all the music mixed and everything, I just export it as a stereo file, 128 kilobytes stereo file, and send it on up to Libsyn. Right.
Okay. So so fairly straightforward production,
yeah.
but the that second Hindenburg template, that's where all the magic happens, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So all right. So we're going to talk about the robot voices. I also want to ask you about music. Let's start with music. Did you find music, or you had someone create music for you?
Right. So the answer is that's both. I have that intro music that was playing throughout that episode 0 there. That intro music was made by a friend of mine who's a musician. His name is Mark Greenberg. He's an amazing musician. And so he made that. There's sort of 2 introductory pieces of music. There's that, and then there's another piece that once we're done with the introduction kind of comes on. It's what I call the like fade out. So like if you were watching a science fiction movie and all of a sudden the spaceship takes off from the planet and the planet gets smaller. That's sort of what I envision is this kind of music that pulls away. So there's the intro to the show where myself and a robot are talking, and then there's this kind of pull away where we go off to the space station. So he made the music where the intro that plays below the intro, and then that kind of pull away music. And then the rest of the music that I have on the show is actually stuff that I found via Creative Commons. There's a musician named Visager who made basically music for a video game. He made a couple of albums called Songs from the Lost World. Oh. And it's kind of perfect for what I want to do. Like it has that kind of sci-fi feel to it because it's video games. It's kind of chiptune, it's like 8-bit video game type of music. Mm-hmm. And it evokes different moods. He has different tracks for like kind of mystery scenes or action scenes, boss fights in a video game, that sort of thing. So I use that music as sort of the bed music for various scenes on different planets or when they're going up against aliens, that sort of thing.
Nice. And in Hindenburg, I guess each is its own little piece, and you could sort of move them around and slide them around.
Yeah. So what's great about Hindenburg is it's really made for audio drama and sort of public radio type broadcasts. And so it's really easy to do bed music in Hindenburg where I can just put the track in and I can kind of the fading is really easy to do, and the ducking is really easy to do. And what's great about part of the reason why I use Visager's music is that he has each album has maybe 12 songs, but then he'll have 12 more tracks that are looped versions, so they're very easy to chop up. So if he has a 1.5-minute track, but I have a 3-minute scene where I want the music playing in throughout that 3 minutes, it's very easy for me to go in, recognizing the waveform. Okay, here's the loop, and just kind of duplicate it out so that I can keep that music going.
Right. Cool. And the ducking thing, let's talk about that for a second, because what you're talking about is when there's music playing in the background, and then it's very typical for radio and broadcasting that let's say the narrator starts speaking, that the music gets pushed down a little bit, so it's more in the background. So how do you, I mean, maybe in general, how do you do that ducking thing in Hindenburg?
So it's great. So basically what I do is I line up the two tracks, the vocal track and the bed music track. And like you said, it's usually like the music is a little loud. There's some silence and the music's a little loud. And then when the narration comes in, it fades down, but keeps playing below the narration. And so what you do in Hindenburg is on the music track, you highlight the part that you want low. So say the track is 2 minutes long, and for 1 minute and 40 seconds of that, so you have 10 seconds at the beginning, 10 seconds at the end, you want louder, but you want that 140 in the middle to be lower.
Right.
What you would do is you'd highlight that part of the track you want lower, and you just drag it down. So you just kind of pull the level down, and it does the fading for you. And you can actually adjust once you've done this, you can adjust the fading too, but it does the fading for you. And then, like I said, you can kind of adjust the slope of the fade a little bit. If you want to fade a little slower, you can just, there are little touch points on the waveform that you can just, or the region that you can just pull along, and that'll change the sort of pitch of the slope, like whether it fades in or out, how quickly it fades in or out.
Right. How steep and how quickly.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right. So then let's get into the, in the intro that we just heard, I heard some panning, and you have voices in different ears and, left and right.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Do you do a lot of that throughout? I think you do.
I do, yeah. So like I said, when I'm recording just my vocal, I always have just my vocal kind of be central. It doesn't change. The narration is always going to be, when I'm telling this story, it's always central. And I try to do all of my processing of that vocal before I bring it into the template, so that that's all done. But then for the various different voices and the robot voices and sound effects and everything, I try to do a fair amount of panning, and I always try to keep it. Actually, I've never done it where it's only on one side, but I do try to, especially if something is kind of ping-ponging back and forth, from rattling off a list, or if there's some noises that are really, like if something's happening in a cave or something like that. Right. I'll try to kind of ping-pong it back and forth and make it a little wider than usual. And yeah, there's a lot of kind of crossfading and panning for. I just think that it's, for me, it adds an almost visual element to it while you're listening. And I don't know how many kids. I doubt many kids are listening to it on their headphones, but maybe they're listening to it in the car, and so they get that effect of hearing the sound move, and hopefully, there's a lot of kind of action in the story. So I try to do a fair amount of panning so that you feel that action a little bit, So like when the monster is chasing you and yelling at you, you hear it go from one side to the other. So you can kind of envision that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like almost like if you're running from the monster, like you're turning your head. If you turn and face it one way, you'll hear it more in one ear. And then if you run away, you'll hear it in both ears. And yeah, that's pretty cool. Now in Hindenburg, is it that easy? Like you just take these little clips and you can pan each clip separately?
Yeah. So that's basically what I do. So if it's just, a clip of a simple noise, maybe it's a door opening, door closing, I just create a track for that, and move it to where I want it. Like, maybe it's like 50% over onto the right or something like that. But if I want one sound, and actually I was just doing this before we got on the call, but if I want to do one sound that pans left to right, what I actually do is, and maybe you know a better way to do this. I'm not sure. This is sort of what I jerry-rigged as I was doing this, is that I'll take one track. So in the next episode that I'm producing right now, there's an alien that's hurt, and he's saying "ow" really loudly. And so when I talk about this stuff, it sounds so ridiculous. But so the alien is hurt, and I want his sound to kind of pan across. And so what I do is I have that sound of him saying "ow," and I make two tracks of that lined up exactly, so it's duplicated basically, and then I crossfade them on different tracks. And so the track on the bottom might fade low, and then the track above it kind of fades up, starts low and fades up. And those tracks will be separated. One will be about 55% to the left, one will be 55% to the right or so. And so when you are listening to it, it sounds like it's moving from left to right because the levels are actually going up and down on those two tracks.
Right.
So that's kind of how I've jerry-rigged it at this point. But Googling around and looking at the support for Hindenburg, I can't see anything where like you can actually do that in a track. Just put a clip in and say, okay, I want to start here and then end over here. But if you know how to do that, I don't know if there's a trick for that at all.
Well, in most DAWs, there's automation, so you can actually just turn on the automation and, with the pan knob, just actually while it's playing, move the pan knob and record that into the automation, and then when you rewind it and play it again, it'll play back your pan move for you. So
that's interesting.
Automation that's the way to move things and make it lively, even ride fader levels, and anything. Actually, you can automate anything, literally.
Yes, I know automation for levels, but I hadn't heard that for panning, and I actually was Googling that, but I don't know if Hindenburg has that capability. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, well, you know how on most DAWs you can, when you turn on the volume automation or the volume line, right? It ends up a line, and you can actually drag that line up and down, right?
Right.
You can turn on one that says pan, and you could probably draw in the pan from left to right.
That's interesting.
It's just another line, and you just make the line go from left to right, and boom. So play around with the automation. Automation is awesome. I don't use much of it. In fact, I don't use any of it because I'm mostly doing just straight up interview podcasts. But
Right. Well, yeah, like I said, I'd seen that for levels before for volume, but I hadn't seen that for panning. And I was Googling around for it, but yeah, I'll have to see if Hindenburg can do that. I haven't seen that in the actual interface yet, but I'll take a look.
Yeah, take a look. However you would automate the volume, look in the same place, and maybe there's a line for the pan. And what's cool is, again, with DAWs, I think you can pretty much automate everything, even plugins. I think. I don't know. I haven't automated any plugins, but like if you want to, change the drive, like the input to a compressor to maybe overdrive it for a minute, make it louder, and then back off on it, or anything you can automate. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty great. Yeah.
See, in fact, that's one of the things I haven't even talked about on this show is about automation, because mostly in podcasting, you don't have to use it. But when you're doing the storytelling in the narrative podcast, definitely you need to do automation.
Yeah, and I imagine that's something that you used as a music producer. I can see why that would be a huge thing for music.
Oh, yeah. In fact, there's really no other way to do a mix in music. If you just put up the faders and you kind of level all the faders and you make it so it sounds good, and if you just leave all the faders there static and you just run your mix, they call that a dead fader mix, and it doesn't there's not much movement and levels, and because to mix things properly you have to ride levels. At some point the vocal needs to be in front, other point the lead guitar needs to come up front. And you can automate every knob on those big mixing boards. And it's funny, before they had the automation systems like the flying faders, right, the faders where you touch it, you move it, you fade it with your finger, and then you stop it and rewind the tape, and then you don't touch the fader, and it literally moves like a ghost is fading it up and down.
That's
so
cool.
That's like before that was available. That's when, if you see pictures of maybe even the Beatles or way back like 60s, 50s, whatever, maybe even some in the 70s. That's when they would have like all the band members at the board. Everyone would have their fingers on certain faders, and it would be like, okay, Joe the drummer, it's like, dude, here's what, like when the first verse is over, fade out that guitar, and then underneath the solo, fade in the the keyboard, whatever. And everyone would be doing little fades, and certain snare hits you want louder, so the engineer will just push up the fader for a second, and it's like crack. But it would have to all be done manually. So it was almost like an orchestrated event where if someone screwed up their fade, you'd literally have to stop and go rewind and do it all again.
Oh, wow. Well, you know, it's
Right?
so funny
And it's
because
like-
as somebody who's learning a lot about production, you know, I watch videos where it's mostly music producers talking about how they use different plugins or different techniques and everything like that. And it's just another world. It's like, I feel like I'm like stepping into a jungle or something like that, just because it is the sort of techniques they use are so far removed from what, you know, a lot of maybe podcasters are used to learning about from various other podcasts or how-to podcast videos, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it is so far beyond. I mean,
Yeah.
not only is there all the different instruments, think about that. It's not just a voice. Podcasting, if it's an interview podcast, it's a voice. You can EQ and compress a voice. Okay, fine, that's good. But what about a bass guitar? What about a guitar? What about a keyboard? What about a synth? What about drum? You know, there's typically 12 to 15 mics on a drum set. All the different drums, all the cymbals, right? It's like, how do you EQ and compress each one and level it and everything? And then stereo compression. Then you got to worry about phase when it comes to musical instruments. If people are recording in the same room or you're recording something with more than one mic, you got to worry about phase. It's a whole nother level. So it's awesome. I loved it. I mean, I was never like one of the top engineers in the world or anything like that, but it's definitely fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's get into the robot voices, because here's the funny thing
I've been waiting for you to ask.
Here's the funny thing I wanted to ask you. Can I send you this clip and can you make Barry a robot voice?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can you make him oh yeah. I don't know how to do it. Yeah. Oh, he'd be like the cool robot.
Yeah, I'll send you a couple different robot effects on Barry. Barrytrons.
It's like Barry. What is Finn Caspian gonna need to actually make it over to that neighboring galaxy?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
All right. So the robot voices. First of all, are you the one doing all the voices?
I am doing all the voices. Yep.
Okay. Because some I can hear, I know it's you. Others I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it is kind of funny because sometimes it definitely sounds like me. Sometimes my speech pattern gives it away, and sometimes the plugin will kind of flatten it so much that I'm not recognizable. We can talk about this later, but one of the great annoyances of doing robot voices that I could do this very easily if I really wanted to really take the time, but I think I'm the only one who's really bothered by it, is that when I can hear a robot voice and there's breath. Because robots don't have lungs, they're not breathing, and it's like it drives me nuts. I'm like, oh, why would that pee pop for that robot, and why does he sigh after that? Like, he doesn't breathe. Wow. So that kind of thing drives me crazy. But so far nobody's complained. So maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe we can cut that part out. But so what I use two different plugins to make the robot voices. One is a Waves plugin called, I believe it's called Sound Shifter. And that plugin is pretty good. Like it's basically just kind of like a pitch shifter, and then it has some effects on it as well. And I like that one, but the one that the robot everybody heard in that introduction, and the one that I use for most of the robots, is one from a company called Sound Toys, and the plugin is called Little Alter Boy, Alter Boy, and it's a very simple plugin. It's a very cool looking plugin. It basically has 4 knobs. I'm actually going to open it up real fast to make sure I'm speaking about it.
Oh, that's perfect.
Properly here. But it has 4 knobs. One knob is for pitch, one knob is for formant, one knob is for drive, and one knob is for mix, which is like kind of dry or wet. And then it has 3 different modes. One's called transpose, quantize, and then robot. And I would be lying to you if I told you I understood what everything does on it. But it's so fun to play with, obviously, to try to figure out these different robot voices. And so you can sync up the pitch and the formant. So pitch is obvious. It kind of goes, the voice goes lower or higher, and then the formant kind of adds a little bit more effect to it, and so you can sync those up, and based on how much you sync those up and how much how much drive you turn the drive knob, it depends on how much that changes how much the robot's voice kind of flanges or just like kind of, for lack of a better term, like freaks out. It's like it becomes less intelligible the more you crank that up. And so for me, I mean, this is actually not a sound thing, but this is kind of like a real like geeky thing from a fiction writer perspective, is that what I love about this plugin so much is that you can make a robot voice sound crystal clear like a robot. And then you can make a robot, like you said, sound more human, like it sounds more like me. And you can make it sound less intelligible. And so what I've been doing with the different robot voices is when a robot is, so there are all these robots on the space station, and some of them are really old robots, some of them are really new robots. And so if anybody ever cared this much about the story or paid this much attention, you would see that the older robots, they're less intelligible. The sound kind of frays a little bit more when they're talking, and they're a little harder to hear. And then as the robots are newer and newer, they become more and more intelligible. So it's kind of, from a fiction writer perspective, it's fun to think about like, okay, what would this robot sound like? He's a newer robot, so his voice is going to sound a little bit better. But then also from producing the sound, it's kind of fun because then you get to also try to give a little more character to the robot.
Yeah. And do you ever use those two plugins together?
I've tried it once. I'm just kind of playing around with it, and it didn't really seem to change things too much, or when it did, it maybe I don't know. It just didn't quite sound right to me. This is going to sound silly for a robot voice, but it sounded too fake, and so for some reason to me. But I actually had been thinking about doing that. But part of it is, like the pitch for Little Altar Boy and the pitch on Sound Shifter. Like part of me was like, oh, maybe what I'll do is I'll raise up the pitch on one and bring it down on the other, and maybe it'll come up with this kind of crazy, almost like Tibetan, like a throat singing kind of a thing or something. Yeah, and all it did was really cancel each other out. It didn't really do what I hoped it was going to do.
It took the high one and brought it down low. Yeah.
Right.
Probably,
exactly.
Yeah.
The Little Altar Boy, that plugin kind of saved my life, because not only do I use that and it makes really great robot voices, but I also use its effects on various sound clips and sound effects that I have, so that if there's going to be a crash or there's like a laser sound or something like that, I'll apply a little bit of the plugin to those things so that they sound a little less polished. They sound a little more
gritty.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so cool. So what? Okay, lasers and stuff. You use it on a lot of different sounds, then maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool. Now the question is, you're writing the story and then you're reading it. You have to record it without the robot voice. So that's what you do, right?
Yeah, I do.
Is that must be weird? It's like, do you try to talk like a robot or do you just speak normal?
It depends on the robot, and but because some robots have different personalities, so like one time, just really quickly, I'll just say that part of the premise of the show is that all the robots are informed. Their artificial intelligence is informed by books, by classic children's literature, and that's how the robots get their personality. So, like for instance, I did a bonus episode a little while ago, and one of the robots on that was Snapebot, who was based off of Severus Snape from Harry Potter. And so when I did that voice, I was actually doing my best Alan Rickman impression from the Harry Potter movies, because he played, a famous British actor who played Severus Snape in the Harry Potter movies. So I was doing kind of that voice and then applying the robot effects on it. And it's actually so great for me as, sort of performing, quote unquote, performing the show, because there are a bunch of things that if I didn't have those, it's like a mask. If I didn't have those things, I would never have the guts to do it. Like this one episode where one of the robots is singing a Destiny's Child song, and I would never get on a mic and sing a Destiny's Child song unless it was like 2 a.m. karaoke or something like that, right? And But if I can sing, and I like tried to sing it as best I could, and then and then I apply the robot effect to it, and then I feel a little safer.
So that brings up another question. You do have a robot that sort of talks with you in the intro, which you asked all the listeners, all the kids to name that robot, which ended up being Bebop.
Yeah, that's right, Bebop.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, do you write that conversation? Do you perform that conversation in one shot, or do you do the one voice in one track and then rewind and then do the other voice in the other track?
I usually do the latter. I usually do one track and then do the robot voice in another track.
And then probably in post you'll have to, slide things around to make sure the timing's right.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Okay.
But I will say that, and this is going to sound even sillier, but sometimes I will. So I'll write that all out, and then I'll record them as separate tracks, and then I'll combine them. But sometimes once I listen to it, I realize like, oh, I sound really stiff. I don't sound like I'm responding to what he's saying. I sound like I was anticipating it and moving on or whatever.
Right.
So sometimes I'll do like a little bit of improv, a little bit where I'll just, as the robot, just say a bunch of stuff to me, and then I'll kind of listen to it and record me responding to the robot saying those things to try to make it a little more organic.
Yeah, because the robot does say some wacky, cool stuff, just like under his breath almost.
Yeah, right.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't tell how embarrassed I should be to be talking about this stuff as a grown man doing these things.
No, it's creativity, man. Come on, it's awesome. Live a little, please.
Yeah, right.
All right, so what else about the robot voices? Did we cover everything with them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that, like I said, like a big part of it for me is trying to capture the character of each robot and try to think about each robot's circumstances to apply the different effects to it. And actually, those, like I said, those plugins have been super helpful for me in terms of altering some sound clips. So I get my sound effects. There are 3 different sites where I go to get the various sound effects. One is called freesound.org, which is just a Creative Commons site. People upload various sound clips, and obviously with a site like that, the quality is variable.
Right.
There's a site called Audio Jungle where I go to get sound clips as well, and the stuff there is usually pretty good, but it's just kind of hard to find exactly what you want, what you're looking for. And then there's another site called Sound Snap, and that site I know is one where a lot of kind of the NPR shows that use sound effects, they use Sound Snap, like Snap Judgment, which is a great podcast, storytelling podcast. It's very, very produced. They use Sound Snap to get their sound effects, and then I'll run those through the plugins in order to kind of give them their own character in some way, because some of them sound kind of generic. And then I also do a little bit, and this is actually maybe a different question. I maybe should have covered this in the speed round, but I will set up a couple of mics. So I have the Focusrite 2i2, and I'll set up another mic besides my PR30 in my little studio here and record sound effects here as well. Do a little bit of I hesitate to call it Foley work because it's pretty amateur, amateur stuff. But I'll record some sound effects on my own as well.
With a different mic. I like that.
Well, I try to do it with both mics.
Oh, both mics. I see.
Yeah.
That might be one thing too. If you want different robots to sound different, you could actually, well, I guess if you're processing it to sound like a robot, it might not matter, but using a different mic would actually definitely change the character of the sound a little.
Yeah, that's true.
Probably not worth doing that, though. Go ahead, buy an RE20 just for the robot's voice. Come on, Jonathan.
Right. Well, I have this great mic that I probably shouldn't even talk about because it's totally, in my opinion, a knockoff mic, but it's a Pile. I think it's called the Pile PDI 58 or something like that, and it's a Shure SM58 knockoff mic, and it costs like $15 on Amazon, and it's great. It's really great. I think it's probably going to last a year before it dies, but the sound on it is it's just like an SM58. And that's so at the end of every show, I interview my son, Griffin, who, operates as my editor. And we talk about what happened in the show. And I have him on that mic because he's a kid and he screams into it every once in a while, like yells into it sometimes, or drops it or knocks it over and that sort of thing. So I have that mic. And so those are the two mics that I set up in my room when I'm recording different sound effects.
That's awesome. I did want to ask about your son. So you set the mic up on a stand and you and him stand there and talk and record it, right?
Yeah, right. So I just set it up on the desk and I'm sitting and he stands next to me. And yeah, we just kind of chat about the show, and he loves it. He's really into stories and books and everything. And so he really loves this story, and he gives me a hard time at the end of the episode sometimes, Wow. He raises questions about things, and he really makes me think about the story. And his big thing is that he hates, and this is actually kind of an interesting thing too. It's not a sound production thing, but something I'm struggling with is that kids now, they all consume content the way we do with Netflix or something like that. So they watch, he has like a favorite TV show, and he'll watch over the course of a week, he'll watch 5 episodes of that show because it's all there on Netflix. He doesn't have to wait for next week for the show. So he gets frustrated with the podcast because it's 1 episode a week, and he's always like, why can't we just do another episode? There should be a new episode tomorrow. So I just recorded our feedback for the next episode, and that was his big thing. Was he was basically like, cut it out with all the cliffhangers, just do the show.
How does he do with the mic? Does he stay near the mic? Did you tell him that, look, when you talk you have to stay near the mic and all that?
Yeah, every episode we talk through it before it gets on. I say, stand at the mic, try not to move around too much, try not to fidget too much, because he's a kid with a lot of energy, so he'll kind of start to kind of move around and sway and stuff like that. And so yeah, we talk through it, and he's pretty good at it now. He stays at the mic for the most part. But there are times where I have to stop the recording and just say, okay, come back over here, get back on the mic, because he's kind of wandering around. He's saying something really great, but it's coming in and I can barely hear it, And right. So I have to just try to stop him right away. I'm like, okay, say that again, but say it right at the mic. Right. And I have friends, he has, some friends who have been on the show telling jokes and things like that. And I have to really kind of train them on it. And now I put them on that pile mic also, because I put one of his friends up on my PR30, and he does what every kid does when you put a mic in front of him. He just yelled as loud as he possibly could into it. And so I was like, okay, let's put you on the other mic.
That is funny. So you're producing this podcast, these episodes with, a lot of different elements, voices, robot voices, music, sound effects. How do you, mix it and level it? Like, how do you tell what should be louder and how loud things should be? How do you do it?
So basically I just do it. I do what you're talking about with automation, but just do it by ear. And so I just play it, and I know this is probably not the best way to do this, but I play it through and I just ride it myself. I'm like, oh, okay, I pause it. That's a little loud. I'll take that down over there. And then I'll do that once, and I'll export it as the MP3, which, the 128 kilobytes MP3. And then I'll listen to that again, in various different ways. So because I figure parents are playing this for their kids, they're listening to it in various different ways. So like I'll play it on my phone with the volume all cranked up, right. And I'll play it in my car, and I'll listen to it on earbuds, and I'll just I take notes on where things might be a little too loud, or where something's not too clear, or maybe there's like a bad edit somewhere or something like that. And I should take hand notes on that, and then I go back in and fix it all in Hindenburg, which I know is kind of crazy. I know that's not how you do things, but I've tried, I tried running it through Levelator. I've tried running it through Auphonic, and I've just never been no knock on those programs. I think Auphonic is actually incredible, and I use it for public impact podcasts, but I don't use it for this because there's just so many tracks, and I know they have the multi-track option there, but I don't want to upload 30 tracks to Auphonic, and
plus
that seems like a time suck.
Yeah, but plus, like a lot of the tracks you don't want to be like you can't do. You have, if it's a narrative podcast with all sound effects, you can't use Auphonic multitrack.
Yeah, right.
It comes to it comes down to your ear. And by the way, taking it in the car and earbuds, that's all normal. That's what you should be doing. That's the best way to do it. There's no.
Yeah.
I mean, look, when you get really good at this, when it's your 14th podcast and you're making these awesome podcasts, I mean, maybe you'll be able to tell while you're doing it.
Right.
Like you'll be able to listen down right at your computer and just make sure. But for now, that's a great way to do it. And so you kind of set the faders, you set the levels where they sound good, and then you just run it down, right? You're not actually riding faders and automating things, are you?
No, I'm not automating anything.
Okay.
And just recently, just the last couple episodes, I started, in Hindenburg, you can create a master track. And I create the master track. Once I have everything leveled and everything, I'll start applying maybe I'll apply like a little de-esser on the master track or a little compression on the master track just to try to polish it up a little bit. And that's just something that I've recently started doing. And that's actually, we were talking before about questions I might have. That's one part of the workflow that I'm still kind of figuring out, like how useful that is, how much it really changes things, and how much, I'm really wary of applying too much compression on the master track, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is sort of like the mastering step. It's like the final thing to get it ready, and it is actually very important. Yeah. And yes, you can overcompress things, but typically the quality of a compressor is like directly relatable to its transparency. So if you buy a cheap compressor or use a cheap plugin, you're going to hear it, and it's going to sound like that, unnatural pumping and breathing kind of thing.
Right.
It's not going to sound good. If you spend money and buy a good compressor, I mean, you won't even hear it. Like the compressor on my voice right now is a Neve Portico 2. I mean, it's probably a $3,500 mic pre-compressor EQ. Yeah. I mean, it's a serious piece of equipment, and I'm compressing my voice considerably, and you can't hear it. You can't hear it because so the point is find a good compressor, and I would suggest a multi-band compressor, certainly for mastering, a multi-band compressor, and use it on the master fader or in the mastering step, and that'll make a big difference. That'll tighten things up. That'll bring it. It sort of adds a little bit of the processing that radio adds. Like radio, they limit it, and they probably compress it a little too, but it's mostly limited and just to make everything really loud for the car. But it's the same thing with podcasting, that if there's too much dynamic range, something's loud and then something's really soft. You can't have too much dynamic range. So the good thing about a decent multi-band compressor is that you can compress it significantly. I mean, you can't do too much, obviously, but if you compress it properly, you won't hear it, but it'll even out those ups and downs, but it won't take out the impact of those ups and downs. You can have a loud sound and it'll still sound loud, but it won't, the wave won't spike as much. Right. So it's a perception thing. So I would definitely recommend that. I use, it came with SoundForge Pro, but I use an Isotope multi-band compressor, and I really like it. So I don't think you can buy that on its own either. Yeah.
Yeah, I use the Focusrite compressor, the one that came with the Focusrite Scarlett. It's
the red.
Yeah, the red, exactly.
Yeah, the red compressor's awesome. The red EQ is awesome too, man. Do you use that?
I've played around with that, but I have played around with that. What I just on the new episode, I downloaded from Sound Toys, that company that makes Little Altar Boy. They have a free, it's called CQ, SIEQ. They have it available for free right now, so I downloaded it. I just started using it on this episode, and it's like, I love it.
Oh, okay.
It was like eye-opening for me. I was like, oh, I was really not doing a very good job before. Sounds a lot better. But I still have so much to learn about all of this that that I thought I had everything EQ'd really well on my voice using the Focusrite one, and then I switched over to this one. I'm like, oh wait, wow, this is way better.
Yeah, the Focusrite Red EQ that comes with the Scarlett interface is really good. The Red series in real life is really good, especially the high end, the clarity. The thing is with the Red EQ plugin, it actually, there's knobs.
Right.
And you can't set the knobs at a certain value. Like if you want to add, like if you want to turn up the gain and put it at +2, you can't. You can't type in +2 and hit enter.
Right.
You have to turn a knob, and when you turn the knob, you don't know where it is. You don't know if it's +2 or +3. So you kind of have to go with your ear, which makes it harder to use for, mid-level audio people, right? So
I appreciate you calling me mid-level. But
certainly, dude.
I think I'm aspiring to mid-level.
You're
but
a little more than
I think
that maybe.
I think that's part of what I had with that EQ was that. So there on the Focusrite Red EQ, you have the different. You have a lot of control, obviously, with the different knobs because you have the low end, you have the high end, and then you also have the mid range. A couple different knobs for the mid range, and then you can also switch the low and the high end from slope to something. I forget what the other.
Yeah, from shelving to peak. That's what they call it.
Right.
Peak EQing or shelving. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was the only. So when I was starting out, it was too many options.
Yeah.
In some way, you know what I mean? Because I was like, all right, well, I turn this knob, but then which one should I have it be on the peak or should I have it be on the shelving or and so eventually I came up with a preset where after playing around with it for a long time, I had the preset where I was like, okay, this is what I want my voice to sound like, and so I just saved it as that. But then this new one, I don't know. There's something very warm about the this CQ that I started using that I really liked a lot, and I feel like with my voice, like your guests always talk about it, how it's very difficult to EQ your own voice, and so that's one of the things I'm really excited about this show because I'm curious to hear how you EQ my voice. But I have a kind of a what I consider to be like a very low, dumb voice, and so I'm always like trying to roll off a lot of the bass from my voice, and then I'm like, but then if I do that, I start sounding like I'm on a telephone or something like that, and so just really trying to figure out that balance has been difficult for me, being very critical of how I think my voice sounds, and then using this EQ, there was something about it that when I was taking down some of the low end, it still stayed very warm to me, and so that's why I like using that one.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you find a plugin you like. That's great. Definitely use that one. And your voice and all voices need low end, need warmth, but it has to be the right kind of warmth. And so you'll see how I process your voice on this episode. I could tell you right now I'm going to be using a red EQ and a red compressor for sure, and the Vocal Rider plugin, and probably not a de-esser because you're not very SE, and probably not an expander either because I don't hear a lot of background noise from you. So
well, that's good.
Yeah. This has been awesome, man. I'm so happy to talk to you because I love the alien adventures of Finn Caspian. I've already recommended it to several nephews and nieces and all that.
Thank you.
And I just think it's great what you're doing. And, like I said, I started listening for the production value of what you're doing because I haven't gotten into the narrative thing and everything. And I mean, obviously, technically, I know I can do it, but I haven't done it. And there's more to it. The story and the pacing and the characters, that's in a way even a little more important than the technology of recording it properly and mixing it properly. So I really appreciate what you're doing, and I'm really happy you're learning and moving forward and always learning more about audio and making it sound better. That's very commendable.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see what you're going to do with the school. Not to suck up to you on your own show or anything, but your show has been really helpful to me. And what I'm really excited about your school and hope to sign up for your classes is that when you do what I've been doing, which is sort of what people call YouTube University or something like that, where you're Googling and going through and watching tutorials on YouTube, you just never know. First of all, you don't know how credentialed the people are, but even if they are credentialed, you never know what you're not learning, right? So it's very compartmentalized. It's not part of a curriculum. It's just sort of like this isolated 7-minute video on compression or something like that. And so you feel like you got that down, but there's like, you don't know what else is out there. You don't know what else you should be trying to learn. So I'm excited to see what you do with your curriculum and everything. And obviously from enjoying your show so much, trust what you're going to put out. So I'm excited to see what happens with that.
Thanks, man. And I just thought, I don't know, if you feel inspired, maybe you could record a little sound clip with Bebop saying, welcome to the, or saying something about the podcast engineering show.
Yeah, I will, and send me a couple of Barry clips, and we'll come up with a Barry bot.
Oh, Barry bot! I love it. Gotta have that. So it's fincaspian.com, and everything about Jonathan and all the links will be in the show notes. But he's the producer and host of the Alien Adventures of Finn Caspian. Fincaspian.com. Jonathan, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely, when your next show comes out, we will, and maybe after you keep evolving your audio skills, you should definitely come back. We'll talk about the new show and the new skills you're using. Yeah. Maybe we could. We should do an episode where you like pick it apart a little bit. You know what I mean? Where you're like, oh, here's what I would have done or something. I think that'd be actually kind of interesting. All right, that's interesting. Well, this is awesome. Thank you for listening. I know you learned a lot. This has been great. We'll be back next week, and of course, our website is podcastengineeringschool.com. Don't know if the courses are up yet, but check it out. Coming soon. Until next time, you know what to do, Barry.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sound great.